Are you yearning for a hiking adventure but daunted by the planning it entails? Have you ever felt lost when hiking a trip before you even head out on the trip? Do you feel lost? Well, it's time to go from confused to confident. I'm here today to guide you into mastering the dark art of hiking trip planning. Stick around and become a pro at plotting your next adventure. Hello fellow adventurers, welcome back to the channel. And today we are doing a tutorial. We are delving deep into the art of hiking trip planning. From mapping routes to packing the right gear, planning a trip can be an absolute maze. So in today's video, I'm going to unveil my secrets to meticulous hiking trip planning that will not only guarantee a memorable adventure, but also ensure safety and comfort while you're out on the trail. We'll kickstart the guide with the essence of any trip, finding that picture-perfect destination or challenge. We'll unravel the how-tos of how I plan my route and ensure that it fits the capabilities of everyone going on the walk and that the walk is suitable for everyone in your group. I do a lot of hiking with kids. I need to make sure any trip I take them on isn't above their capabilities. Transitioning from the macro to the micro, we'll do a quick overview of gear essentials where you strike a balance of being well prepared but not overloaded so your pack is weighing you down. We'll finish up with a bit of safety measures, that sort of thing, and ensuring that you are armed to deal with any unforeseen circumstances along the way. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. Let's get into hiking trip planning. Welcome back, Mowser here, and today we're looking at hiking trip planning. Now I've been hiking for over 30 years. I've worked sometimes as a hiking guide. I take many friends who are unfamiliar with the wilderness into some pretty crazy areas, and I have become known as a bit of meticulous trip planner when I'm taking all these guys out into the wilderness. So we're going to get straight into it, and first up we're going to look at selecting the right hike. Now you may be new to hiking, you may be thinking, I want to get outdoors more, I want to go and explore the world a bit, I want to go and do some local hiking trails, and you just don't know where to start. You haven't hiked much and you want an idea of what to do. Or you might be well experienced and you just don't know what you want to do next. You've done everything. You don't know where to find another walk. Are you going somewhere? How do I find a walk in this area that I haven't been to? Well, my first tip is that just throughout the course of your day-to-day life, if you are reading an article, if you are looking at something online and you see a place, a walk, whatever, and this applies to everything when I'm just living my day-to-day life. If I see somewhere I want to go, a walk I want to do, a place I want to visit, a restaurant I want to go to, I will there and then do a quick note in my phone, on a piece of paper if that's your thing. I will put a note in my phone, in the notes thing if you're an Apple phone user, or if you're another phone user, you've got a notes app of some sort. I put a note in there, places I want to visit, under restaurants, walks, whatever, I put it in there straight away. I actually use Google Maps. That's available on pretty much any device. I find that spot. For example, I saw a restaurant that was mentioned on a podcast yesterday. I dropped a pin on that restaurant. So in the United States, I may never go there, but if I am there, that pin is now on the map and I know that's a cool restaurant that I'd like to visit. It's just a very easy system to identify places that I'm interested in, that maybe I'll go walking to someday, and I'll just pop a pin on the map. Then when I'm looking at that area, when I know I'm going there, I can look, oh, there's a pin there. Why did I think that I wanted to go there? I even put a little note when I put the pin down of why I wanted to go there. So I've come up with this system where I just keep these notes, these pins on the maps. They're all in the one spot. And the biggest problem I often have is deciding on which walk to do, not what can I do. Does that make sense? I guess it does, but it's a good little system, and that's my first point. Just as you are reading through your day-to-day life, just keep these notes about walks you want to do. My notes for Tasmanian walks where I live here in Australia is extensive. I've got a massive diary of notes in addition to guidebooks, that sort of thing. I've got a big list of walks that I want to do. Now that's just little ideas that pop in your head. But in addition to that, there are websites, guidebooks, apps, forums on places like Facebook, and just talking to other people who have the same interests in general, you'll come up with lots of ideas. And as you hear about those ideas from the books and the apps and that sort of thing, you pop them in your notes, you don't forget them then, and then you can scroll through them later on. Now, as a fairly experienced hiker, when I'm going to a new place that I haven't been before, one of the first things I do is look on an app on my phone or on the web called All Trails. Now, at the time of me recording this, I'm not supported by All Trails in any way. I just find it a useful app. When I'm traveling to a new spot, I even use it in my local area around my neighborhood, and I just go and have a look on there, and it's got suggestions for all sorts of walks in the area. Now, I recently traveled to Norway with all my family, and while we were there, we had a plan to do lots of hiking, which we did, which was awesome. We'll make a video about that at some stage. Let me know if you want to see some Norway action. But before I went, in the year before, I was on All Trails looking at hikes in the areas we were traveling to, and just marking them, saving them in the app. You can click save. I was putting a pin on Google Maps of those walks, leaving notes on that pin about why I wanted to go there. Then I was also starting a bit of a diary in my notes application on my phone, on my computer, giving me an idea and a plan of what walks I was going to do, and notes and links to all sorts of places with details about those walks. So I'd be Googling them once I found out about them, putting them in my notes with those links, writing my own notes. And even if I didn't do the walks, I've now got this comprehensive little library of hiking trip notes for walks in Norway, should I go back there. Hope I do. Now, in addition to trips to places like overseas or interstate of Australia, I've just got little notes of walks all around Launceston here in Tasmania and Tasmania itself. I've got comprehensive notes. When I'm often sitting waiting for a coffee, or I'm at a cafe, or I'm waiting in line somewhere, if I'm not reading a book, I'll often, if I'm bored, just look through my notes and say, oh, what's a good walk I could link up? I know the walks well enough in my head to be able to create little itineraries. So I'll sit there just jotting notes of, got 1 day itineraries, 2 day itineraries, 3 day, even up to 10 day itineraries. I've got this whole library of them that I've created in my phone, and then it's there for me to reference when I'm deciding on a walk to go on. If you're still at a loss, you don't know where to look, walking clubs. There's plenty of walking clubs around, and they will often, especially if you're new to hiking, give you a good idea of how to prepare and how to head out on a walk. And they're a good way to meet other people who walk as well if you don't have any friends that want to join you on a hike. Okay, so you've got your idea for your walk, you know where you want to go, you've looked in your reference books, you've had a look online, you've spoken to some people, and now you've picked a walk you want to head on. So before you go blazing out there without any other planning, there's a few things you need to consider before you head out. You need to consider things like the season. Is it the middle of winter? Are you heading up into a mountain which is crazy in winter? Probably not a good idea. And continuing on from that, the weather conditions. What's it going to be like where you are heading? I often look at rainfall charts. If I'm going on a longer walk, I will look at the months of the year and try and figure out when the best sort of window of weather is to go hiking there. The terrain. Are you going up over a massive mountain range, or are you just walking on a flat bit of beach coastline that's nice and easy? You need to consider that, as well as the fitness level of everyone that is going on the walk with you. There is no point taking your 6-year-old child on a 10-day walk if they've never been on a 10-hour walk or a 10-minute walk. You need to take all that sort of thing into account as well. Distance. How long is the walk? Have you got enough time set aside to be able to complete the walk in that time? Are you going to be able to cover that distance in that time? This is particularly important when you're heading out on longer trips. If you're heading out on a 5-day trip, a 6-day trip, a 10-day trip where you're out in the trail, fully self-supported the whole way. Here in Australia, when you do walks, you've got no shops, you've got nothing along the way. You are got to be self-supported for the entire trip. You've got to take that into account, and can you cover that distance in the time frame you have allocated yourself? And tying into that is the level of difficulty for that walk. Now, you can get 6 or 7 day walks that are pretty straightforward, but you can get 6 or 7 day walks that are extremely hard, and a lot of people shouldn't be going anywhere near. And that difficulty will often be determined by the walk's location. So think about the location too. Where is it? Is it hard to get to? Do you need specialised transport to get there? That sort of thing. Take that into account. So in order to assess all that sort of stuff, you're going to need some detailed information about the walk. Now, through the process of your day-to-day note-taking and stuff, if you followed my advice and you've been taking notes along the way over the last year for a walk, you may already have this information. If you don't, you need to gather some of that detailed information. Look for things like detailed maps, guidebooks, as well as online resources. Mowser.com.au is not a bad option. Educate yourself about the trail's terrain, the elevation, any potential landmarks that may be helpful, as well as any potential hazards along the way. Now, there are various ways you can assess the terrain and stuff. Again, one of the best ways is to talk to people that have been there, that have done it, that have some experience with the walk. Like I have gone through before on this channel, I use various apps and computer websites, that sort of thing. Computer websites? What are you talking? Websites, that sort of thing, to help me sort of track what the terrain is going to be like along the way. One of them is gpx.studio. It's just a free web app that I use to plan a route before I head out on a trail, and I will just use that to plot my route, where I'm going, and it will also give me an elevation profile of the walk. I will do this for each day of the walk, and it will give me a good idea and what my sort of limitations are for that day. It will also tell me the distance traveled for that section if I want, give me a bit of information as well. It's a pretty cool app. I suggest you check the link out down below to that video if you want to know more about gpx.studio. I also use various other apps, Garmin Connect, Strava. I will use Gaia Maps, Avenza Maps, more while I'm out there for Avenza, but they all sort of come into the planning for the trip. There's various mapping softwares out there for topographic sort of satellite imagery. I will look at that, particularly for walks where there is no track or trail. I'll be looking at that before I go to zoom in and just check the terrain out and help me plan a route, especially in these very thick forested and scrubby areas that we tend to walk to. And to give you an idea, I am just not doing all this stuff over a weekend or over a day. I'm planning these trips, this is the big trips, I'm planning quite a bit of time out, at least a year normally for a big trip, sometimes longer. Now, other things you are going to need to consider when you're planning is, where is the walk? Like I said a minute ago, where is the walk? How are you going to get there? Is it an out and back walk where you can park your car, walk out, come back to the car? Is it a loop where you park your car, you do a big walk in the one direction generally, and you come back to where your car is parked, finishing at the same spot as what you started at? That's not proper English, is it? I don't think it is. Is it a point-to-point walk? That is where you start in one spot and finish in another. Now, a good example of that in Tasmania is the overland track where I used to work. On that track, you start in the north of the state, you finish in the middle of the state, and it's about a 67 kilometre walk point to point. There's a lake at the end as well, which you've got to go across in a ferry. So you need someone to drop you off at the start and someone to pick you up at the end. You need to take that into consideration, because when you finish, you don't want to be stuck there for a couple of days waiting for someone to help get you back to civilization. And something that I used to think of, and what I still think of when I'm taking people who don't have as much experience on a big walk, is, are there exit routes along the way if I needed to access them? That is just something to keep in the back of your mind. If I had to get out of this walk along the way, if something happened where we were still able to walk but we had to get out, or if I had to get out for an emergency back home, whatever, I'm just thinking, what are my exit points if I needed to get out? And I have had to use that on occasion. We've had injuries where the person could still walk, albeit a bit slower, so we've had to exit down to things like to a lake and get our boat to pick us up earlier, that sort of thing. But it's just something to think about.
We're actually going up there to try and find a route off the range so we can get Gordo down with his bad knee. It's pretty bad, he can't walk. We're going to have to take most of his load out of his pack.
Now, as I am gathering all of this information in preparation for my walk over the months beforehand, I am putting all this generally into the Notes app on my phone under that specific walk's own note. I am also scanning track notes. I am looking at blogs online. I'm copying that into these notes and building up a comprehensive library of notes just for that walk. I will take the scans from the track notes in books, that sort of thing, and I will just dump them all into this note. So if I'm out on the trail and I need to change my plan, I have access to all the information while I'm out there on my phone. I'll even print some of them out as well and onto waterproof paper, believe it or not. And I will just have it there. If I need to change plans while I'm out on a 10-day walk, I've got access to all the information so I can make an informed decision. So if a plan changes, I'm sitting in the tent one day, the weather's come in, it's looking terrible, we can go through the information. We've got all the information at our fingertips and we can make a decision on what we're going to do next. Now, I should point out, I will do this even for a walk that I've done several times. For example, earlier in the year, we went out and did the Western Arthur Range, talked about that before, but that wasn't my first time there, but I did this sort of preparation for that trip that I had done before. It's just kind of fun as well, organising for a trip. I love it. I love trip planning, all the permutations you can have with your itineraries, all the scenarios, and having all those notes in there will give you something to do while you're out the track as well. You've got some notes to read. So next up, you're going to plan your itinerary. Now, like I said, you don't leave this to the last minute. This is something for a big trip you are planning well beforehand. And I, in fact, have itineraries for many trips that I had just sort of sit down some on a rainy day. I will sit down and come up with an itinerary for a walk that I one day want to do. And it's just sort of sitting there in the background. When I am sort of planning in more detail to go on that walk, I've got a bit of a rough idea of the itinerary and the research I've done, and I can get into more detail with it. So you've got the idea of the walk, you've got your itinerary, so you just want to break it down into manageable sections, you know, that could be days. So you might have a 5-day walk, you're going to put it into your 5 sections you think you're going to do. And from there, you can also even break it down into days and into half. So this half of the day, we're going to do this. The last half of that day, we'll do a little side trip somewhere. Just plan it into manageable sections. So then you can't get too overwhelmed while you're trying to plan this whole thing. Now, while you're doing this itinerary, you need to plan for things like fitness levels. Am I going to need a rest day? Am I going out for 10 days and going to walk for 10 hours every day, for 8 hours every day? Today we're having a rest day after a few very
tough days in the sun and in the heat. We've climbed Pecana Peak, we've climbed Conical Mountain, we've climbed the Spires.
Or am I going to allow myself a rest afternoon? Am I going to have a day where I just walk for 3 hours and then I have a rest? Or am I just going to have a whole day off and have a rest? They're nice. Those rest days are lovely. But always lean to the side of allowing more time. Don't sort of underestimate the track. Don't say, well, it's normally an 8-day walk, we'll do it in 6. Unless you have been there before, unless you really know what you're talking about. If it's new to you, you need to allow a bit of extra time. And especially here in Tasmania, in Australia, you need to allow for the weather. Weather can roll through and you're not going anywhere sometimes. You need to sit in the tent and bunker down for a day. So on all of these big walks we head on, we normally allow for at least one extra day, and we allow for food for that as well. So if you are coming to Tasmania, you haven't hiked here before, it is essential that you allow for the weather, especially if your time isn't that flexible and you're coming in March or April when the weather starts to roll in. You probably want to allow for a bit of extra time. And the bonus of that is, if you allow for an extra day or two, often you can finish early. You finish a day or two early, and that's kind of cool. After you've been out on a walk for 8 days and you finish a day early, you're like, oh, it's good to be home, you know? It's just something to consider. So after you've considered all that, you should have a pretty good plan together. And a lot of guidebooks will give you sort of an idea of an itinerary as well. My only advice there is don't take it as absolute gospel. Do your research elsewhere. Don't rely on one source of information. Rely on many. And probably most importantly, know your own ability. Have you done much hiking? Have you done much climbing and ups and downs if you're going on a mountainous walk? Have you done much exposed sort of rocky climbing? Like if you're going to the Western Arthurs, have you done walks like that before? It's going to be exposed and there's going to be some heights. Just know your own abilities when planning a walk. Now, one example, I'm heading out on an overnight walk in a few weeks. It's not one I have done before. There's no trails, there's no track to speak of, and we've been researching this walk now. Over the past few years I've taken the odd note here or there, but the last month I've been researching it a lot. I've been talking to people that have done it, asking people online who have done it, how they found it, how long it took them, to give me an idea of how long it's going to take us. Now the times do vary a bit between all these different people, but we've now got a rough idea of how long it's going to take us. We know we'll do it in 2 days. It's just a matter of how long over that 2 days it will take. So even myself, who has over 30 years of experience hiking, I'm still planning like this today. Next, you need to gear up. One thing I am known for saying is that the right or wrong gear can make or break your hiking trip. Invest in reliable gear, including footwear, comfortable clothing, and a good backpack. Don't forget things like your hat, your sunglasses. Insect repellent is a good one that I always forget on those buggy sort of walks. Now I'm not going to go into a huge level of detail here with the gear. I review lots of gear on this channel. There is heaps of videos in the library. Check all of them out. Go and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you can check out all those videos as well. And while we're here talking about subscribing, why don't you like this video as well? If you got this far, it's probably worth subscribing, don't you think? Hit that subscribe, smash the thumbs up button to say you like the video, and I will get right back. What were we talking about? We're talking about gear. Now, like I said, I do lots of reviews here, but if you want an idea of what I take on a trip, well, there's a couple of videos specifically you can watch. So for a multi-day trip that I did earlier this year, 9-day hike, I did a full gear review on that below. That was called the Western Arthur Range. There is a link down below to the gear prep for that trip where I went through everything I took. There may be a link also just there, which you can click on to check out the gear for that 9-day trip. Ended up in 8 days, but I took 9 days worth of stuff. And in terms of a day walk, I only did a video just recently where I went through all the gear that I took on a pretty rigorous day walk, and you can check that also up there as well, I hope. Is it there? If it's not, it's down below. Below there are also links to my specific gear lists where you can go to a couple of websites. So I've got a Western Arthur's gear list which takes you to Lighterpack. I've got a day walk gear list that takes you to a website called Pack Wizard. Just trying both those options out. I've used Lighterpack, but checking the Pack Wizard out as well. Video coming on that soon as well. But if you want to check out the gear that I actually take in terms of a gear list, that is down below as well. I will also leave a link just for a generic gear list that you can download. It's one that I've created and I've used for years, and I always give it to people. It's just a generic gear list of backpack, tent, that sort of thing. It breaks down into day walk and multi-day walk. That's there for free for you as a viewer of the channel. Feel free to download it and use it for all your walks, and even create your own gear list from that if you like. So with all that in mind, with all that gear information, just the bare essentials, the the main items you need to make sure you have before you even start planning your trip, and that would be things like good footwear. Now, we could have the whole boots and shoes discussion. I'm a boots guy. I've broken my ankle hiking before. Maybe we'll talk about that in another video.
Video update. I think I've severely done something to my ankle. I just slipped on a rock back there. It's very slippery. And it slid forward and bent a funny way, and I heard something crack big time. I don't know if it was a stick or my leg, but it's really painful. When I move it a certain way, I'm able to stand on it, but it doesn't look good. I can't walk properly. That's not a good sign.
But I do trail run and I love trail shoes. It's each to their own, really, in this day and age. Backpack, you've got to have a good backpack. Back in my early days, I didn't have a very good backpack, but you just want something that balances sort of comfort and functionality, and I do go into that on another video. You want a good sleep system. You want a good sleeping pad and sleeping bag. You don't want to get cold and wet, particularly rainy and wet conditions. You want a good tent. You want a good outer shell. That's your rain jacket, your raincoat, and your rain pants. You want good stuff there. And you want good clothing, general gear. Absolutely no cotton when you're out in the wilderness. There is no place for cotton. Won't go into that in detail, but no cotton, just good quality clothing. You want your basic navigation aids. You want your satellite messenger or GPS if you've got it, one or the other. You want an EPIRB if you don't have one of the InReach minis, or which I've reviewed before. You want something that you can raise the alarm if you had to, if you're out in the wilderness and you get stuck. You want a hard copy map. Don't rely on your phone. You want a hard copy map with you, and you need to know how to read it, or you need someone in your group who knows how to use a map. And if you've got a map, then you should have a compass as well, because there is no relying on the phones 100% of the time. So if you don't know how to use one, if you're going with people who don't know how to use one, do some online training first. Go and talk to someone at a map shop. Do some research, learn how to use it, do a little course, do something before you go into the wilderness, especially an untracked wilderness. If you're going down that sort of road, you should be knowing how to read a map anyway. But if you're just heading out the trail, make sure you know how to read a map. So that is a very quick rundown of gear. Like I said, check out all the other links to my gear videos below and on the channel page. Next up, in planning your trip, you're going to want to consider things like nutrition and hydration. What's the water like where you are going? Is there enough water? Are you relying on water tanks at huts? Are you in areas where there's potentially really dry sections of track for days on end? You need to take all of that into account. Do you need to filter water? In Tasmania, we're lucky enough that you really don't need to filter water basically anywhere. It is right to drink straight from the river, straight from the stream, but you just also need to consider things like, is there going to be enough water where I am walking day to day? And generally, any notes you read, people you talk to should be able to help you there. It's pretty well documented here in Tassie which walks there is water issues. Then once you've got your itinerary together, you can actually say, well, I'm going for 7 days. I need 7 days, 8 days food, allowing for an extra day. You can start to plan your food that you're going to need for the whole trip. Now, for a big trip, I normally start putting all my food together around 3 weeks before the trip, just because I like to be organised. Some people leave it a bit later than that. That's me. If it's a shorter overnight trip, then generally I've got a little bit of stuff on hand and I can do it a day or two beforehand. The things these days, like your dehydrated meals, make it very easy to plan for a trip. So you can have a couple of these in the cupboard if you're walking regularly, and you can have them out and heading out on the trail. You just chuck a couple of them in for an overnight walk. That is a good little option. And again, I've got a video link down below or up there where I go through all the food I took on the 8 or 9 day Western Arthurs trip. And next time I head out on a big trip in the next couple of months, I will do another video on the food for that trip. But in the meantime, you can check out all the food I carried on that walk, around 600 or 700 grams a day of food for that trip. And I was able to do that because I had a good detailed itinerary and I was pretty accurate about how long I was going to be out there. So that was important to minimise the weight I was carrying as well. Once I've got my food together, also need to consider, well, not once I've got it together, this is something I consider in conjunction with my food and my gear and the itinerary, is the safety measures. So safety should never be an afterthought. Like I said, you want to make sure you've got like an EPIRB or a GPS navigation system. You should have some way of raising the alarm if you need to. That's just a given in this day and age. But like I said, you should have your navigation sorted. You should also have first aid. You don't need to go crazy on first aid. As a pharmacist, I used to go nuts and take these massive first aid kits with all this gear, and basically it was silly. It was just silly how much gear I used to take for first aid. Customize a first aid kit for the specific needs of your group. These days, I just take the bare essentials. Like I'll take a few band-aids, a blister kit, small little blister kit. I will take stuff for minor grazes and abrasions. I will always take something like my snakebite kit. That comes every time. And in that has also got a couple of triangular bandages, which are very good for all sorts of situations. So that can be doubled up and used for other things as well. But that comes on every trip. And there is certainly no need to go nuts with your first aid, but do have a good think about it, and you will modify it for each trip. So the way I tend to think about it in terms of first aid, if something really bad happened, no amount of first aid gear will help you, but first aid training will. So it's important that you at least just do a basic first aid training if you're going to be out hiking all the time. I think it's important to renew it sort of however often they say. I think, is it every 3 years? If you're really keen, you can go and do wilderness first aid. They're a good course to do. Have done them quite a few times over the years. But just having a basic knowledge of first aid is important and is helpful, as is having your EPIRB or your messenger device so you can alert the authorities if you get in trouble. But certainly if you had to, if it's life-threatening, if there's no other way you're going to be able to make it out other than with help from an external party, then you hit that SOS button and you're on the way. But just be prepared, know what you're in for, and know your basic first aid. And do take a first aid kit of some sort. There is all sorts of pre-made first aid kits you can buy, flashing a few up on the screen now. They're not a bad option either as a basic first aid kit for when you're hiking. So there you have it. That is just a basic blueprint for starting to master the art of trip planning. And just remember, a well-planned trip is the first step to a memorable adventure. That sounds pretty profound, doesn't it? No, just kidding. It is important. It makes your trip better. If everything is organised down to a T, like I'm just ridiculous with my organisation. Ask any of my friends, ask my wife. If we're going away somewhere, it's all in a spreadsheet, it's all planned. But gee, rarely anything goes wrong. Rare. It's extremely rare in the last 30 years that we've had something go wrong on a trip because it's just so well organised. So if you're ready to take your hiking planning skills to the next level, check out the links below. Check out the downloads that I hopefully have put in there by now. By the time I release this video, I'll have a few little treats in there for you. Check them out. If you like the video, share it with your friends. Let them know about it. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. That is out now, coming out every month. There is a link down below for that to sign up to the newsletter, and also go to my blog. Check that out. A lot of this stuff is on the blog also, as well as detailed sort of trip notes on all the trips that I have done. If you got any questions, you got any videos you want me to do, then leave them below as well. We've got a new video coming out every week, so stick around, like, subscribe, do all that great stuff. In the meantime, it is springtime, it's nearly summer here in Australia, and it is getting good. I'm getting prepared for a walk coming up in a couple of weeks. I actually haven't let the managing director know that yet. Better get onto that. For an overnighter, we'll post that soon. More trip videos coming up, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one. Get outdoors, enjoy the weather, and I will see you next time. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.